Yeah, it's a
But
minimalistic approach, right? It's a minimal approach to making wine. Um, any kind of challenges or variability that you see because you take that approach where you're very minimalistic? You're doing that and also making skin fermented wines. Any kind of challenges that you see in the winemaking?
I think there's challenges every year. It's ever changing, and you're working with something unique every time. But I think that you have to be open-minded and consider like blending options. So I think I've put a bit of Riesling in my amber, which has given a bit of structure and freshness, and given the sort of feel of keeping the wine together that I wanted. Um, and so I think it's about adapting and being open to blending as a technique for getting a wine to somewhere that you're really happy with. I did a lot of blending at a winery I worked at in the South Island, so I feel like I managed to learn a lot from those, years, thinking outside the square and just fine tuning things a little bit that way.
Mm-hmm. Do you find with climate change that the art of blending or having to blend has become more important or not a factor?
I think it's definitely a factor. I think being able to climate change, like have a open mind, to how you react or combat challenges, because I think that's just going to continue in this thread of climate change, and it's so challenging for any farming, food, wine, meat, whatever it is. It's definitely not easy, not been an easy season for the east coast of the North Island here. We've had cyclones. They've been very devastating further up the coast, and just relentless kind of, so much growth and so lush and green, where it's normally, a normal season would be quite brown and dry and consistent. And so you're learning a lot, and you're having to think outside the square, adapt. And I think blending is a good way to do that if you want to keep your wines as minimalistic as possible.
Yeah, no, I can see that. As we talk about land and climate and soil and so on, do you feel, when I talk to some winemakers or somms in different parts of the world, where orange wine or amber wine is a thing and a real movement, some of them speak about the soil and terroir being perfect for getting that luscious robustness and great phenolics off of a white grape that spent some time on skins. Do you think any of that applies to New Zealand? Is there anything terroir related that makes amber wines out of New Zealand really stand out?
This is an interesting one, actually, because I've had this conversation with fellow winemakers before, and I think we're still in early stages of evolving in orange wine, and having enough to really have a good conversation around it. I've heard a lot of winemakers say they all taste the same, but in fact that's not true. It's, with like anything, like for example, honey, I've tasted honeycomb from two different sites within a kilometre of each other, and the diversity of flavour and aroma in those two honeys. So I mean, any wine grower knows within a parcel how much variation they've got within a block. So I think certainly New Zealand might have a different style, like we do with other wines, to the rest of the world. But there's diversity within that if you look hard enough and you've got enough to compare within. So being in Martinborough, little village in Wairarapa here, and they've been farming Pinot Noir, for example, for 40 years, and within the stretch of road, Puruatanga Road, where most of the old vines are planted, you're starting to see with time, vine age and knowledge growth, real diversity of Pinot Noir within that small area, So I think the same could definitely apply for orange wine.
That's awesome. Let's talk about New Zealand orange wine. You said that it may be different than other parts of the world. How would you describe New Zealand orange wine in terms of flavor? How would you best describe that?
I think we've got like a brightness of fruit with our young soils. I think that as with other wines, we have this abundance of delicious fruit, and it's kind of like a glass of joy. It's not perhaps yet at a stage where you're going to have something as complex and layered as a Gravna, I haven't seen anything like that yet. And then it's just different. Again, like any wine, it's different input from the person crafting it in terms of how their techniques around that, what expression they want to show. But yeah, I think joyous and bright and delicious when I think of orange wine, fruit laden. Yeah.
Those are great descriptors, I will say. Listen, so we talked about the orange wine or amber wine adoption from the consumer in New Zealand, or the scene or movement. What about natural wine? Is there a real appetite for natural wine in New Zealand? And what's the movement like there, if there is one?
I'd say definitely, like a lot of people that restaurants that stock my wine in Auckland, for example, I think that's where you're seeing the most interest. The younger wine drinker who wants to explore and try something different, or even get involved. They're really eager to come and visit the people they've met through hospitality industry and see the vineyards and play with the grapes and learn and I think it's definitely growing up in Auckland, like places like Karangahape Road, where there's a lot of trendy restaurants and they're just really open-minded and keen to learn and play and have some fun, and supportive of that whole philosophy around knowing where it's from and as untouched or uninterfered with as possible. Yeah.
Let me ask you, is there, from your personal opinion, is there a market globally or a region that you think is knocking amber wines out of the park? Like these folks know what they're doing.
Good question. I mean, like our range selection here is fairly small, and I haven't been traveling for a while, obviously with the pandemic and things. So, and I've just come out of 8 weeks, it feels like, of isolation in the winery. So, I think South Australia, when I was living there, was doing some really exciting stuff. And there's an Italian portfolio of natural wine that comes into New Zealand through an amazing guy who I buy regularly from. And I love the Italian amber wines, orange wines. They're really, really interesting. And they've got a nice tension and energy to them. Like most Italian wines, I guess, they've got that acid drive and yeah.
Yeah, Jannine, I'm not supposed to show bias in this, but I agree with you 100%. All right, as we wrap this up, I have 2 final questions for you. Amber wine in New Zealand, what do you see? Where is it going to be 7 years from now? In your crystal ball.
Maybe we'll see it. Good question. I hope just that we have a bit more diversity of it, quite a bit more. There are very small amounts of it available, and you kind of need to be following on who's released something because it's not in massive amounts. And I think, hopefully just a bit more variety and it's seen by a wider audience, like having people more open to tasting new and different things. I mean, I realize wine is like this treasure trove that's never ending, like, and it's a bit daunting. And I just hope people can not feel so nervous or the need to stick to what they know, just like explore and keep learning. So that gives us more opportunity to play and do the same.
I like that. My final question for you. I am a very big proponent of pairing wine with my foods. And so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to end it off this way. What is your favorite meal to open up one of your amber wines and have with that?
Yeah, you know what? I was always thinking about wine and food matching, but when I saw that question, I was like, good question. Cheese. Cheese is my go-to food. I could just be quite happy with a delicious amber wine and some firmer cheeses, probably a bit of quince paste. You know, often you get that quince and spice coming through. I think the fat solids would help, you know, cut through the richness of the wine. Or match it, probably better descriptor. Yeah, that would be my easy go-to one at the moment. I'm not interested in cooking right now. I've just sort of just work, eat, sleep kind of motions at the end of harvest. It just takes a while to come out of it and, you know, find the time and energy to get back into that. So I'd probably go for a cheese with quince.
That sounds delightful. On that note, Jannine, thank you so much for spending the time with us today to talk orange wine from a perspective of winemaker in New Zealand. Jannine Rickards, winemaker at Urlar and the phenom behind Huntress. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you, Beverly.